Introducing the new electric Renault Zoe, Europe's best-selling electric vehicle since its launch. Now with an incredible range of 395 kilometers, and all from a single charge. Meaning you'll have to stop before your Zoe does. The new Renault Zoe, electric for every day.
Good evening, and what a fantastic intro we've had there. So welcome to JJ Burke Car Sales virtual discussion on electric vehicles. I'm Caroline Downey, and I'm delighted to be here with you this evening for this fantastic event on electric vehicles. We're here this evening in the fabulous west of Ireland, in Ballinrobe, in JJ Burke Car Sales, and it's an absolute privilege to be here this evening. JJ Burke's is one of the west of Ireland's busiest and largest dealerships. They are a main dealer for Peugeot and for Renault, and it's been here since 1974. And you can see behind me here, they celebrated 45 years 2 years ago. So it's fantastic that we are here this evening for this electric vehicle event, and we've a fantastic evening in plan for you. I first of all want to introduce you to one of the dealer principals here, Joseph Burke, who is part of the team at the helm of JJ Burke Car Sales, along with his sister Karen and Pauline. So with further ado, I'm going to introduce you quickly to Joseph before we kick off proceedings. And Joseph, we'll zoom in now. Hello, Joseph.
Hey, Caroline. Thanks for the introduction. Sorry, just getting used to the technology here. So look,
it's very different.
Yeah, it's a little bit different, Caroline. So it is. But no, thanks everyone for joining this evening. And just a very quick introduction. Say, like here at JJ Burke Car Sales, we're passionate about electric vehicles, and we decided we'd hold a virtual event to maybe inform the public about what exactly it is about that electric vehicles have to offer the public and what's involved in ownership of electric vehicle. You know, there's misconceptions out there, and maybe people don't realize exactly how easy it is to have an electric vehicle and to run it in your everyday life. You know, and we represent two manufacturers that really are at the forefront of electric vehicles. We'd say with Renault there, we've the Renault Zoe that is the top seller electric vehicle in Europe for, I don't know, the last 6 or 7 years. 100,000 vehicles sold last year in just the Zoe alone. So look, I let everyone else talk, and we'll get to all of that stuff later. But it's an information evening, Caroline, I think we're going to have this evening, and just informing the public about, you know, everything to do with electric vehicles.
Thank you, Joseph. And as you said, it is an information evening. I suppose we all would agree that in the last couple of years, the landscape of the motor industry has changed considerably. And a lot of that is down to electric vehicles and the introduction of electric vehicles. They've spurred changes, which we're going to see changing the landscape and becoming a greener, slicker future for Ireland and for the rest of the world. But we're told that the aim by 2030, we're all going to be driving electric vehicles. 2020, the market share of new cars for electric vehicles was only 3% of the market share. So how is this going to happen? How are we all going to go electric? I think a lot of the reasons why we're so slow to take up on this is because we are not fully educated enough, and we're not fully aware of what it is we need to know about electric vehicles, how it's going to impact our daily lives, and how we will be able to align ourselves with being electric. So I know with JJ Burke Car Sales here, it's an ongoing discussion they have with their customers. How much will it cost? What is an electric vehicle? What's the difference between electric and hybrid? So as Joseph said, this evening is an information evening to tell you all who've joined with us this evening all about electric vehicles and where it's going. So we're going to get started, and at any point throughout the evening, I would ask you to pop in your questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to them as quick as possible. So we have a fantastic lineup for you this evening. We have top experts in the motor industry, those being Geraldine Herbert, Geraldine motoring top motoring journalist in Ireland. We also have Executive Director Hugh Hall from ePower Ireland. We have our own in-house experts who will be joining us later. But first of all, I'd like to kick off the proceedings and this evening with Shane Prendergast. Shane is Programme Manager at SEAI. He joined SEAI in 2017 as part of the transport team, and he now is the Programme Manager over the programme. So I'd like to introduce Shane, and Shane will be available after his presentation for questions. Enjoy the presentation.
Hi, my name is Shane Prendergast and I'm the Programme Manager for Electric Vehicles for SEAI, and I'm here to speak to you today about electric vehicles. So what is an electric vehicle? There are three types of electric vehicles. The first such being a battery electric vehicle, which is also known as a fully electric vehicle. This type of vehicle uses a battery as the sole means of energy storage for the propulsion of the vehicle. The vehicle itself is purely driven by the electric motor and the battery pack, and the battery pack is charged by connecting to an appropriate charging unit either at your home or on the public charging infrastructure network. By plugging this vehicle into our national electricity grid, it allows us the opportunity to access renewably generated electricity. At SEAI, we refer to this as plugging into the wind. The second type is a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. This vehicle has a combination of an internal combustion engine and an electric motor and battery pack. This vehicle will have a smaller battery pack than a fully electric vehicle, but again, this vehicle will have a plug which allows us to plug the vehicle into the national electricity grid to allow us to charge the vehicle while accessing that renewably generated electricity. The third type is the hybrid electric vehicle. Again, here it's a combination of an internal combustion engine and an electric motor. The important thing to note here is that the hybrid electric vehicles do not have a plug. The battery is charged solely by the petrol or diesel engine and the motion of the vehicle itself. And the battery pack again here will be smaller than what you'd find in a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. The number of EVs on the Irish roads has been growing at an extremely fast rate over recent years. And as you can see from the graph in front of you, on average, it's almost been doubling year on year. And at present, we have over 27,000 electric vehicles on Irish roads. What has been driving this massive increase in EV growth in Ireland? As you can see, a lot of it can come down to the number of different models of electric vehicles, both fully electric and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles that are available on the Irish market, and manufacturers are bringing more and more of these type of vehicles to the Irish market. As you can see from the graph in front of you, there's big increases in the number of models available. And the real interesting thing about the number of models available is the range and the single charge of the models that are coming to the market. This has been increasing dramatically, as you can see from the slide in front of you. I think everyone will have heard of the Climate Action Plan and the targets. And this slide just shows you the level of the numbers that are behind the targets for 2030 in Ireland. So as you can see, there's 840,000 cars, 95,000 light commercials, and 600 low-emission vehicle buses. So a lot of people say these targets are extremely ambitious, but I would say, why not be ambitious? Why not go for it? This needs to happen. So what you can see actually in the motor sales industry is that the motor sales are actually reducing. But as I've just shown, the sales in the EV industry are going the other way, they're increasing. So while the industry itself is contracting, the EVs are actually expanding. And even given the current health crisis that's there, it's very impressive to see the momentum building behind the electric vehicles. So essentially, we are basically approaching a tipping point. So it'll be similar to the smartphones that everyone knows. There was one day everyone was going around talking about them, and the next day, everyone had one in their hand going around there. So the estimated proportion of electric vehicles required to achieve this target. So this is a piece of work that we've done in SEAI. And as you can see in the graph to the right-hand side, that shows the percentage of new sales of vehicles required to be electric as we move towards the 2030 targets and achieving those targets. And how are we going to do this? It's through a number of different measures, such as the grants and subsidies that are currently in place. There's taxation measures through duty prices. the recent carbon tax ladder that was introduced in the budget, the low motor tax of electric vehicles. You can see there's been a change in the VRT rates as well. And then you look at items such as possibly the inclusion of a toxic emissions tax, such as like they're doing in London, particularly with their exclusion zones, and how an import duty due to Brexit is going to affect the second-hand, the used and the imported markets. Also, there's falling battery prices for the electric vehicle battery packs constantly, which again will reduce the upfront capital cost of the electric vehicles and will bring us closer to a price parity with the petrol and diesel equivalents. Also, there's a ban on diesel and petrol by 2030 rumoured in Ireland. A number of different countries have already moved to legislate this. And you can also see the manufacturers of the vehicles themselves are committing to only producing electric vehicles from 2030, 2035 onwards. What do you need to consider when you're buying an electric vehicle? So for me, one of the main considerations is the environmental benefits of an EV. So for fully electric vehicles, there's actually no tailpipe. So there are no tailpipe emissions. That means that there are no toxic emissions or particular matter coming from the vehicle. So this will lead to an improvement in air quality, and this will have particular relevance in the more urban areas. Switching to an EV will actually reduce the CO2 as well, given that, as I said, there's no tailpipe emissions. But it is important to note that there is CO2 associated with an EV when you take into account the carbon intensity of the national electricity grid used to fuel these vehicles. So even taking that into account, the CO2 levels associated with EVs are a lot lower than their internal combustion engine equivalents. And the more renewables that we can put on our national electricity grid, the better and cleaner EVs become. So given we have a target of 70% renewables to be on our national electricity grid by 2030, EVs are just going to become cleaner and cleaner and more efficient. Another point under the environmental considerations is noise pollution. EVs are a lot more quieter than the petrol and diesel equivalents, so this will actually lead to a more peaceful drive for yourself. One of the most important considerations when buying a car, never mind buying an electric car, is the financial side to the purchase. So I think everyone here can agree that electric vehicles do have a higher upfront cost. But what we find in SCAI is that people looking at purchasing a car put too much weight on the upfront costs, and that's what we call hyperbolic discounting. They don't look into the potential savings that an EV can offer over the lifespan of the vehicle. So this is the total cost of ownership. So when you take into account the total cost of ownership, EVs will more than wash their own faces when compared with their petrol or diesel equivalents. For example, a typical electric vehicle, you can save up to 70% and even some occasions even more than 70% on your annual fuel cost bill. They have lower maintenance due to the less number of moving parts within the vehicles. So they have lower tax rates available to them, and there's a load of different incentives and supports present in Ireland currently for purchasing an electric vehicle. So when you take all that into account, that's covered by the total cost of ownership. The EVs, as I said, will more than wash their own face when you compare them with their petrol and diesel equivalents. And that's not to mention the convenience of an electric vehicle. You can charge it when you're at home, when you're asleep. You can just bring it home, plug it in, similar as you do with your mobile phone. So let's talk about the generous suite of incentives that's available in Ireland to support the uptake of electric vehicles. So you have the SCAI grant, where you can get up to €5,000 for the private purchase of an electric vehicle and up to €3,800 for the commercial purchase of an electric van, your N1 category vehicles, like commercial vehicles. It is the dealer that will apply for the electric vehicle grant on the customer's behalf. Then you have VRT Relief for cars. So there is VRT Relief for a fully electric vehicle until the end of 2021. At the turn of the year, there was changes to the VRT rates, where the VRT rates for fully electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles were changed from 14% down to 7%, which is a massive saving in terms of the purchase price of a vehicle. There is zero benefit in kind tax available until the end of 2022, but it's important to remember that this only applies to fully electric vehicles, and it only applies to the first €50,000 of the list price. There's also what we call accelerated capital allowances. This is where a company can claim tax back on their profits up to the value of the capital cost of the energy efficient equipment. And the normal capital allowance, you would claim this back over 8 years, but for an accelerated capital allowance and energy efficient equipment, you can claim this back all in the first year of the purchase of the equipment. So this applies to charging equipment as well as the vehicles themselves. And if you check out the EEE register, you will see all the vehicles and equipment that you can avail of under this accelerated capital allowances. So motor tax. Fully electric vehicles operate at the lowest rate of motor tax, and plug-in hybrids have a low rate associated with them too. And as I mentioned previously, maintenance costs. The maintenance costs of electric vehicles are lower, and this is mainly down to the fact that there are less moving parts on an electric vehicle than a petrol or diesel equivalent. There's actually more than that. So there's also your toll incentive, which is where you have a 50% discount on motorway tolls for fully electric vehicles. The discount is a little less for plug-in hybrids, I believe it's 25%. This discount actually increases at off-peak times, and it's capped at €500 per year for a private user and €1,000 per year for a commercial user. Then you have the SEAI Home Charger Grant, where we provide up to €600 towards the purchase and installation of a home charger unit. And I just want to emphasize here, this applies for a new vehicle, a second-hand vehicle, or an imported vehicle, and it's only available for private purchases. Commercial purchases do not qualify. Another consideration when you're buying an EV is the suitability. So it's important when you're buying a car, never mind an EV, is to understand your daily driving needs, understand what your typical journeys are, understand what your typical daily driving requirements are. We at SEI find that most Irish people will overestimate what their typical driving day is. And judging by the CSO stats, they show the majority of Irish people will drive 50 kilometers or less per day, which means an EV is perfectly suitable for almost everyone that's out there. Personally, I feel you'll actually find an EV for everyone and everyone's driving needs out there. And I would just like to advise people to just do the research around EVs, do the maths around it, around the total cost of ownership, not just the purchase price. Visit drivingelectric.ie, inform yourself on EVs, educate yourself on EVs, and definitely take that test drive. I find people who take that first test drive in an electric vehicle, they always come back excited and enthused about electric vehicles, and they always come back with a big smile on their face, which we've come to refer to as the EV grin. So again, just reiterate, when it's safe, go to your local driver, take a test drive, and see how suitable an electric vehicle can be for you. Now I'd just like to talk a small bit about charging and charging infrastructure. In SEI, we categorize charging into 4 separate areas. The first area is your home charging, which is pretty much self-explanatory. And at SEI, we expect 80% or more of all EV charging to be done at the home. The second area would be your destination charge points, which would be your charge points you'd see at your shopping centres or your hotels. The third area is the on-street chargers. They're the chargers you'd see as you're walking down the street in your locality. And then the fourth category is what we call fast or rapid charging. And I just want to talk about the developments in that area for a moment. So Lidl have installed 40 chargers at 20 stores for their customers. EasyGo in the Dublin area alone have 184 chargers and possibly more by now. Tesla have installed 24 by 120 kilowatt units at 6 sites in Ireland, and they've installed over 45 destination chargers as well. Ionity have installed 14 350 kilowatt units, and these are to go in at 6 sites across Ireland, and I think at the moment there's 4 or 5 sites fully functional. ESB eCars to look after the public charging infrastructure. For their fast charging network piece, they have 70 50 kilowatt units at present, and they're also, through funding from the Climate Action Fund, building charging hubs where you'll be able to charge your vehicle on 150 kilowatt units. Just to cover the domestic and the public on-street side charging, as I mentioned previously, SEI offer a home charger grant of up to €600 towards the installation and the purchase of a home charging unit. Some items on this is that it has to be off-street, parking has to be available to you, and that it has to be a private purchase. In 2021, we're actually going to expand this program to cover multi-dwelling houses. and also apartment charging solutions. We also run what we call the Public Charger Infrastructure Grant, where you can get up to €10,000 per post for installing a charging unit in residential locations. So this program is essentially to cover the residential parking locations where they do not have access to off-street parking. And this will be run out through your local authorities. So if you're looking to access this, please contact your local authority. So I'd like to thank you for listening to me today. My name again is Shane Prendergast. I'm the Program Manager for Electric Vehicles and SCAI, and you can contact me through the details there. Thanks.
Now, thank you very much, Shane, and welcome back to JJ Burke Car Sales. There was an awful lot of information in there, and I do know that it's a lot to take in. So I would say we will be putting this up on all our social media channels and our website later tomorrow. So you can go back and look into it, because there is a mind-boggling amount of information. We're going to bring Shane in just for a second to say hello to us. Shane, how are you doing? Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
No problem, Caroline. Delighted to be here.
Great. And look, as I was saying there to our audience, there was an awful lot of information there, but we will be available for everyone to view tomorrow. One of the questions, I suppose, that came in from one of our audience is, so as a consumer, do they not have to do anything when it comes to taking out or getting a grant for purchasing an electric vehicle?
Not really, no. Essentially what they would have to do is go into their local dealership and decide on which electric vehicle they like to purchase. They'll then sit down with the dealer who will do the paperwork for them.
So it's all down to the dealer that you'll be working with, that they'll be able to do the grant for you, grant application for you.
Yeah, essentially how it works is the dealer will pass on the discount of the grant to the customer and will apply to SCAI for reimbursement to the grant amount.
Okay, so do you pay the full amount of the vehicle, or do you pay the amount minus the grant to the dealer?
We would pay the grant amount to the dealer as a contribution on the customer's behalf.
Okay, okay. And how are you seeing, I suppose, the uptake on electric vehicles yourself at the moment, Shane?
At the moment, it's actually a lot of momentum in the area at the moment, as I mentioned in the presentation there. As said, year on year, it seems to be in the region of kind of a doubling, actual physical number wise as well, which is fantastic to see. And even given the whole global health crisis we're in the middle of at the moment, we're actually seeing an extreme increase in activity in electric vehicle sales, which is fantastic, particularly given as the sales overall are reducing, which means that the percentage of the market share of electric vehicles is actually growing at a substantial rate.
Okay, okay. Well, look, as I said, the presentation will be available on the JJ Burke Car Sales website and our social media channels from tomorrow. And Shane, you have your details there as well, so you'd be open to anybody looking for information from yourself. You'd be available for questions.
Oh, indeed. Please feel free to contact me at any time and I'll respond to you then.
Perfect. That's great, Shane. Thank you so much for your time this evening. It's very much appreciated.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. So we will move on. And as I said, there's a huge amount of information that is out there on electric vehicles. And that's what this evening is all about, is providing you with as much as possible. And that we are always here for you. And I know that the likes of Shane and Hugh as well would be available if there are any questions. So now I'm going to hand over to the very popular Geraldine Herbert. Geraldine is one of Ireland's top motoring journalists. Geraldine has been a journalist for the last 15 years. You would probably hear her regularly on News Talk, either on Pat Kenny in the mornings, or you'd hear her in the evenings driving home from work. She's also contributing editor and motoring correspondent for the Sunday Independent. And of course, she has her own website, Wheels for Women. Good evening, Geraldine. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Caroline. Can you hear me okay? Because my broadband is a bit dodgy this evening. So can you hear me all right?
You are coming in perfectly, Geraldine. Thank you so much.
Brilliant.
So look, I'm going to hand it over to Geraldine, and then we might have a quick chat with you afterwards once you have your presentation done, if we have any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem at all. Now, I don't have a presentation as such. I'm going to talk to a few things. Now, I'm going to very much recap on what Shane was saying, because as Caroline said, there was a lot of information in there. Now, just to go back to what Caroline said at the beginning as well about this ambitious target for 2030 that we'll all be driving electric. The electric car sales are slow at the moment. There's no doubt about that in terms of just market share. As Shane said, 27,000 electric vehicles are on the road at the moment. There's over 2 million cars on the road. So it's still a very, very small proportion. But I think what we have to do is we have to look at the bigger picture. And if you look at sales of hybrids, plug-in hybrids and electric cars, then you see a much different picture. Now, in 2016, the combined sales of those three different types of vehicles was a little over 2%, which was a very, very small share of the new car market. That share has increased this year to 30%. So we now see 1 in 3 people going into car dealerships are not opting for petrol and diesel anymore. So this is a huge, huge change. Now, what are they buying? Well, as Shane pointed out, they're buying either a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid, or an electric car. Now, the hybrids have proved to be the most popular at the moment and in the last few years. And probably the reason for this is that they're just the simplest to make that transition from petrol and diesel into. You don't have to worry about range anxiety. You don't have to plug them in. You actually have to do very little. You just drive them like you would a normal car. So that's been the big, I think, attraction for people. They have an electric motor and a petrol engine. Now, the way they work is at low speeds, the electric motor is operating, and at higher speeds, the petrol engine kicks in. But the driver's unaware of all of this. You don't have to do anything. They're particularly suitable for people who do, I'd say, more urban driving than motorways. You have to be careful about motorway driving because you're relying then on a petrol engine, so they're not as efficient maybe as a diesel car. So from that point of view, it really depends on the kind of, I suppose, the type of commute you have as to whether or not you get the full benefit of hybrids. But as I said, the main attraction is for people is you don't have to change your lifestyle in any way. You just drive them like you normally would. They have lower emissions and higher fuel efficiency than your average petrol car. Now, on the other end of the scale is the electric car. And as again, Shane said, you plug that in and you get a range. Now, I suppose the brand new electric cars have an electric range of anywhere between about 300 kilometers to 450, and this is more than adequate for most people's driving. So you'll find most people only have to charge an electric car once a week. Some with the more expensive ones and the higher ranges might only have to charge them twice a month. So they really are not in any way an inconvenience. The big attraction, I suppose, of electric cars is, apart from the fact that they're much, much better for the environment, they're great fun to drive and they're incredibly cheap to run. Again, as Shane said, they have fewer moving parts, so their servicing costs are much cheaper on them. But the actual, day-to-day running costs are very, very cheap in comparison to, and these, as I said, in terms of the electric range, or the range being anywhere between 300 and 450 kilometers. If you're charging at home, you're talking about spending €5 or maybe €7, depending on what the range is, to get that full range. So this is minuscule in comparison to petrol and diesel, which would probably cost you about 4 or 5 times more. So now, the downsides of electric cars are, number one, obviously there is a price premium to be paid at the moment when you compare the price of them in terms of, say, the equivalent size petrol or diesel car. And also, if you're going on a long journey, you're going to be depending on the public charging network, and that requires a little bit of planning. Now, I will get back into electric cars and go into them in more detail at the moment, or in a few more minutes, but now I just want to move on to plug-in hybrids. Now, plug-in hybrids are literally a stepping stone between the two. They have an electric battery, like an electric car or a fully electric car, that you can charge. So you plug it in directly and you get a range, usually kind of 50 to 60 kilometers would be what you would expect. So they're quite different from hybrids in that sense, but they're similar to hybrids in the sense that you have a backup petrol engine. Well, it's predominantly petrol. Now, plug-in hybrids are more expensive than hybrids. They're not as popular at the moment for that reason. But there's also other considerations with plug-in hybrids. The first of them being is you really have to charge them daily to get the full benefit. Because the range is about 50 or 60 kilometers, as I said, to get the full benefit of that, you really do require charging them every day. So you have to be prepared to make that commitment. The other issue is, if you take them on a motorway, you're relying on a petrol engine, and you're not only relying probably on a petrol engine, but you're also carrying quite a heavy battery in the car. So it's not as economical as you might expect. So you have to weigh up all of those considerations before you decide for a plug-in hybrid. But as I said, a lot of people like them because you get a chance to kind of experience what an electric car is like without any of the range anxiety, because you do have that petrol engine to fall back on. Now, in terms of which of the three you pick, I suppose it really comes down to, number one, your budget, And number two, as I said, the type of commute you have and the type of driving you do, and that really determines which of them you're going for. Now, I'll just look at, I suppose this whole event is more about electric cars than anything else. So just look at the considerations in terms of electric cars. Now, the first thing I would say if you're going to consider buying an electric car is do the maths. Again, as Shane said, there's a lot more to the cost of an electric car than simply the price. The price is higher, as I said already, than in terms of petrol and diesel, but the running costs are much cheaper and there's much lower motor tax. And there's much lower servicing costs. So you need to look at the total cost of ownership. And that's really what you need to look at. And I know it's very difficult to do that because people just see the initial price and think that's a lot of money to invest. It is, but at the same time, when you balance it all out, and that's the kind of maths you need to do, you then have to make a decision if you can afford it or not. But that's the way you need to look at it, not just the price of it. The second thing you need to do is do your research. Now, gone are the days when an electric car was just a small little urban runaround. There's a huge number of models to choose from now. Now, there isn't by any means the same choices you get in petrol and diesel, but there's more models coming on stream all the time. So there's much more variety. So you need to consider all of those things. There's a lot of choice out there in terms of electric cars. The other thing is test drives. Now, I know JJ Burke actually do tailored test drives, so you can take a car for anything from 24 hours to 72, I think it is. I would definitely recommend take as long as you can for a test drive, because there's a lot to get to grips with an electric car, and you really can only do that through experience. You can talk to somebody about what it's like to drive an electric car, but until you get behind the wheel, you really don't get that experience. And one of the really big benefits to actually driving an electric car is you get to see how you can manage the range and what the range actually means. And you learn very quickly that different types of styles of driving have different impacts on the range. And once you get to grips with that and you realize how you can actually extend that range, I think that's the real kind of turning point for people, because they suddenly realize I'm not going to be stranded. I'm not, my range is not going to disappear from 200 kilometers to 50, like really, really fast. You just see that this is actually something that is manageable. It isn't a finite amount. You can actually extend it. Again, you don't understand that until you get behind the wheel, but you'll also see just how much fun they are to drive. And as I said, how, driving on a motorway is going to have an impact on your range. Driving in stop-start traffic, all of these things have very different impacts on your range. So the only way you get to grips with that is actually just take an extended test drive. So I would definitely say that. The other consideration, if you're thinking of going electric, I would say is do not buy an electric car unless you have access to home charging. It really is essential that you can actually charge the car in your own home. And you may only have to do it once a week, as I said, but it's something you do need to do. As I said, it's incredibly cheap in comparison to petrol and diesel. The other thing about charging is get to grips with the public charging network. Know where your nearest charge points are. Now, the public charging network provided by the ESB was free up to about 2 years ago. It's been phased out over the last 2 years. This is actually a good thing, though there was quite a bit of opposition at the time, but it's actually worked out really well for two reasons. Number one, it has stopped people from just parking their car and hogging charging points, which was actually something that was happening quite a bit. So now charging points are used for exactly what they really should be, which is just to pop you up to get you on the road or get you to your next destination or to get you home. So it's freed up a lot of the charging points. The other thing as well, by the ESB actually charging for it, they now have the money to invest in the charging network, so they've replaced a lot of the slow chargers. It's still not by any means, perfect around the country. There's gaps, in places. There's still broken down charging points that haven't been replaced yet, but it is getting better and it's improving all the time. So that's in terms of charging, I'd definitely say get a home charger. If you have your own home and your own driveway, that isn't an issue. If you're renting, you'll obviously have to look for landlord permission, so that could be an issue. And if you're in an apartment, it's not impossible, but it's slightly more difficult. So they're just things to consider if you're buying an electric car in terms of charging. Now, the other worry that people have are about the batteries. Again, there's no real issues to be concerned about. The Nissan Leaf has been on the road for more than a decade. The Renault Zoe has been around for a very long time. There's been there's no real issues. They would have come to the fore at this stage if that was the case. Car manufacturers are now guaranteeing that most batteries to up to 8 years and even longer. So if they have that much confidence in the battery, then you as a consumer should as well. So batteries do degrade over time, but nothing too significant. So really that's not something to worry about. The final point I would say about just buying an electric car is get advice from people who have an electric car, because they are the best people to really tell you about various different pitfalls and various advantages and all sorts of things. And there are some very good Facebook pages. There's an Irish EV Association owners association, and there's an EV owners as well. They're pretty easy to find, but you can join them quite easily and you can ask. And these are people who've been there, been where you are. They might be on their second or third EV at this stage, and they have a wealth of information, and they're always delighted to share with newcomers. So I would definitely do that. Just one last final word then in terms of looking ahead to the future. I'm sure there's lots of people who've tuned in tonight and thought, I'd love an electric car, but I haven't got the budget, or there isn't an electric car that suits my needs or, my family's needs at the moment. And what I would say to you is, the biggest cost with electric cars at the moment is the battery. The battery is the significant reason why they're more expensive than petrol and diesel. There are huge changes coming in terms of batteries and the cost of batteries, and it's likely in the next 2 to 3 years that price will be reduced drastically, to the point that you'll be able to walk into a dealership and the petrol, the diesel and the EV model will all be more or less priced the same. So then when you factor in how cheap it is to run the EV will be the cheapest option. So I think when that happens, we'll see a huge move towards EVs. The other thing I would say in terms of the new models coming, and if there isn't a model for you at the moment, in the last 12 months, there's been a huge number have arrived. Another significant number are going to arrive in the next 12 months. There's lots in development. So, they are coming in the next 2 to 3 years. We'll see, a massive amount of EVs and choice on the road. And the other thing as well is, if you don't have the budget ever for a new car and you can't envisage yourself in an EV, the more new cars that are sold, and as I said, this market is changing rapidly, the more there will be a very decent second-hand market. So, if you're not in a position to upgrade at the moment or to change to EVs, don't panic. Change is coming, cheaper cars are coming, and there's a huge range coming as well. So you don't have to do it this minute. So Caroline, I'll go back now to you. I think I've explained everything far too fast.
Out now, and I'm buying an SUV or an SUV. I'm buying an EV. Thank you so much, Geraldine. That was fantastic. There's a few questions coming in, so I'm going to fire ahead and ask you again. An awful lot of information for us all to take in, but it's the future. It's where we have to be, and it's where we're going. So, one of the ones, and you did say it there towards the end, the decrease on the price of the cars. How far along do you think we are with that? Obviously, they are a lot more expensive. People's pockets are a lot tighter at the moment with where we are. So how far in the future are we with decreasing the cost of the cars?
Yeah, there's two schools of thought on this. Some people say it's going to take, to the end of the decade before we get there. There's others who say no, 2 to 3 years. My own feeling on this is 2 to 3 years. I think we're going to see it. There's been a considerable breakthroughs in battery development and battery technology. So I would be very optimistic and see 2024. We will see EVs coming into the country the same price as petrol and diesel.
Wouldn't that be amazing when you think then of the total cost of ownership, compared to where we are?
Well, Caroline, if you think of Norway, in Norway they've actually created that price equality simply through taxes. So they really tax petrol and diesel, and they very generously subsidise electric vehicles. As a result, 70% of new cars in Oslo that are bought are electric, and I think it's 60% over the country. So it just shows you, once you have that price parity, that's the key thing. Then people go electric. They don't think twice about it.
And you had mentioned earlier the cost of charging your car for a week is something like €4, but actually putting diesel in your car or petrol in your car for a week would be €20. So,
people have to think like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Another question we have here, Geraldine, is with the 2030 Climate Action Plan, is it only the BEVs that account for this, or will PHEVs be included as well?
At the moment, what the government are saying is plug-in hybrids, because they're technically electric cars, will be included, and battery electric, obviously. But I would see hybrids as not being included. Now, having said that, they might change their mind. In the UK, what they're looking at is they have a 2030 deadline, but they're extending for hybrids till 2035. Whether or not we'll do the same, I don't know. But definitely plug-in hybrids and battery electric will be available in 2030. They'll be the ones for sale.
Okay. Another one here. Just think the government should introduce a good scrappage scheme to get rid of our old diesels, petrols. Do you think this might come anytime soon?
I don't see this happening for the simple reason that the last time a scrappage scheme came into Ireland, we had a very different car ownership market. Now the majority, well, not the majority, but a lot of people buy cars on PCPs. So they're not actually, paying the full price for them. So it's debatable whether or not a scrappage scheme would be useful from that point of view. And also it's very difficult for people to go from a very old diesel car to still get the money together for an electric. The gap is very big there to bridge. So I'm not convinced. And I think, in fact, the last tax study that they did, that the Department of Finance did, they found that a scrappage scheme wouldn't be an effective way of doing it. So I don't think there's any plans to introduce one. That's the bad news.
Another one, how fast do electric vehicles go? Or do they go as fast as your normal diesel petrol? Because you were saying there about, you have to think about how you're driving now, as opposed to driving petrol and diesel, because it wears down the battery. So are we all going to be driving Miss Daisy come 2030, or?
This is why you have to test drive these cars.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay, two things about them. You don't have to drive them like driving Miss Daisy, but what you do notice is it does encourage a different form of driving, just smoother, I would say. So, no harsh acceleration and harsh braking is going to cost you range. So we'll all be calmer drivers when we're driving EVs. We'll be much less stressed. Yeah. But definitely they're very zippy, because the thing about electric cars is they have instant torque, and torque is basically that power when you put your foot to the accelerator, and petrol and diesel have to actually get there. So they have to build that torque. EVs, this is the one thing, and this is why I'm saying test drive them, because you put your foot to the floor and you will just take off like a rocket. So they are great fun to drive in that sense. So no, driving Miss Daisy, that's gone. They were milk float ideas. They're over.
And you know what, Geraldine? It's so funny, because this is what people are thinking.
Yeah.
And that's, it's gas. And that's why we kind of have to, I suppose, put on information evenings like this and have people like yourself talking about it. There was another question then, somebody was reading up about extreme weather conditions affecting the battery charge. Is that something to be concerned about?
Yeah, let's be honest, no car likes cold weather. So, your petrol and diesel will struggle as well. Yeah, there is an issue with EVs in terms of just, it may take a bit more toll on your range. You might see your range deplete a bit faster because the car is working that bit harder in bad weather. But let's be honest, we don't have minus conditions that often. If we get one snow day a decade, we're doing well. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it, no.
Okay.
And I mean, look at Norway, they have terrible winters, and yet they still have, huge. So if it was an issue, I think we'd know by the Norwegians.
Okay, perfect. Well, look, I think that's all for the moment. I know there are questions coming in after because I know there's a few more questions there for Shane. So we might get you again later on at the end for a little Q&A, Geraldine, if that's all right. So look, thank you so much. Available. We'll chat to you later. Thank you very much, Geraldine.
Okay, thank you.
Now, we're now, as Geraldine said, the only way, I suppose, to know about electric vehicles and know how to drive them is by driving them yourself or talking to somebody who has already owned and is driving a EV. So I'm going to put up a video testimonial of one of our customers, Seamus Coyne, who bought an EV in 2018. He purchased a Renault Zoe. He's a very happy customer. He's been coming back, thankfully. So Seamus is going to tell us all about his experience driving his Renault Zoe.
My name is Seamus, and I have owned a Zoe for the last 12 months. I guess I can only compare it to the previous car I had, which was a 1.6 litre diesel engine. I used to fill the tank maybe every 10 days, cost me about €75 per fill. So over the course of the year, that does accumulate to a fair amount, maybe about €2,000 in pure fuel costs alone. In terms of grants, I received the grants at point of sale in terms of the Vrt rebate and also the SEAI grant. And then in terms of other grants, I got a grant to cover the cost of the purchase of my home charging unit. I find the home charging unit is great as a backup. It's ideally suited for an overnight charge. I can plug the car in, set up a schedule so that if the charge kicks in maybe around 2 or 3 in the morning, and I know for sure then it's going to be fully charged by the time I'm ready to go. I see the environmental benefits as being very significant. There's obviously no carbon footprint from an electric car. An electric motor is just going to be more efficient to run than a full engine. My favourite features of the Zoe are the fact that I can control a lot of the settings via an app on my mobile phone, the charging schedule, for example. There's a comfort timer, which means I can, in winter time, I can set a schedule so that it warms up before I require to use it. In terms of luggage space, I find it adequate for my needs. While it's compact, there still is a lot of room to carry around 2 or 3 passengers and a boot full of luggage. I bought my Zoe locally here in Ballinrobe in JJ Burke, a Renault dealer.
And we're back. So there we go. So there you go. There was Seamus, and he, as I said, purchased his Renault Zoe back in 2018, and he is a very, very happy camper. So now we are going to have a chat with Hugh Hall. Hugh is Executive Director of ePower Ireland. Hugh has a background in communications, and he then set up ePower Ireland in 2 years ago. And ePower Ireland is all about charging and all things charging and your on-street charging that Geraldine referred to earlier. So Hugh, good evening. How are you? Are you there, Hugh? If you want to unmute yourself. Oh, there you are.
How about that now? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
How
are you?
Good.
You're very
good,
welcome.
Good.
Thank you for joining us this evening.
Super stuff. Thanks. Good to be here.
Great. Well, look, I'm going to hand over to Hugh, and you can tell us all things about charging, and we'll have a chat then afterwards.
Great. Yeah. Super stuff. Can everybody see my screen okay? Okay, good evening anyway, and thank you very much, Caroline, and thank you to JJ Burks for asking me to join you this evening to talk a little bit about EV charging solutions. Both Shane, yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you there. We actually can't see your screen just yet.
Oh, okay.
Now, I think you might be frozen in time, I'm afraid. So I hope your Wi-Fi is working okay this evening. You seem to be frozen on my screen anyway at the moment.
Can you see now?
Ah, there we go. Thank you very much.
Okay,
that's great.
Okay, let's kick off there again. Rewind.
Go.
Anyway, start again. Listen, thank you very much for having me there tonight. Both Shane and Geraldine have explained a lot about the cars and why I drive electric. So I won't go into that into too much detail, apart from to re-echo it and agree with everything that they have said. And I personally have been an EV driver now for several years. And it's all about the personal experience and pure enjoyment people get out of driving. So I highly recommend test drives. That's what dealerships are there for. So go into the dealerships and test drive, because this is all new to people. Instead of talking about smartphones, I'm actually going backwards, back to the start of the car. So here's just a little bit, a photograph there of New York back in the 1900s. Everything was horse and cart, bar one car on Fifth Avenue in 1900. And then 13 years later, they were all cars and just one horse. So it just shows that over a short period of time, there can be a massive transformation. And I believe, and Geraldine and Shane and everybody is saying it now, that we are at a turning point in time, and it's only a matter of years before everybody will be driving electric. It's not just the government talking about this. Now, this is actually happening, and it's the manufacturers are getting fully behind this as well, and they've all had some very major announcements out there as they transition towards electric. This, of course, is one of the early days hybrids. Just a little pun on the hybrid setup. In terms of charging points, and I've divided charging points into three sections. So you've got the domestic chargers, you have commercial or destination chargers, and then you have the rapid DC chargers or journey chargers. It's estimated, and Geraldine has said it there as well, that 80 to 85% of all charging will be done at home. And then when you include the destination chargers, which will be your work chargers or your shopping center chargers, that's nearly up to 95% of all charging. With the balance, just a small balance of 5% will be the journey charging, the DC fast charging. The home charging, of course, is very, very convenient. And the interesting thing about the home charging is that because it's at home, we would encourage people to treat the car now more like a mobile phone. Instead of a car of old, you used to fill it with petrol or diesel, you drive away until the tank was nearly 3/4 empty, and then you go into a service station and fill up. In the case of an EV, you plug in every night. So just like you do with a mobile phone, you plug it in every night, and every morning you wake up and you have a full battery. So you know you have your full range in the battery before you start every day. And that gives you confidence of range. Here's just a range of domestic chargers that are available on the marketplace that we would carry on an ongoing basis. And the choice of domestic chargers, it's a personal choice, but some of the differences and functionalities in them are as follows. That first of all, the home charger, do you want the charger to be a tethered version or an untethered version? So in referring to the tethered version, what that means effectively is that the cable is fixed to the charger on one end. So when you drive home in the evening, all you have to do is go to the charger, get the plug, and plug it straight into the car, and the charging starts. Or else you can set a timer and it'll come on during the night. But it's as straightforward as that. If you go for the untethered version, that means then when you come home in the evening, you must go to the boot of your car, you dig out the cable and you plug it in on both ends. And after the charging session, you obviously have to coil up the wet cable this time and put it back into the boot of the car. So there's an element of convenience here, that the difference between the tethered and the untethered. But you're weighing up convenience versus the aesthetics or the visual aspect of the charger itself. Because if you go for the tethered version, the cable is obviously on the charger. So cable has to be somewhere, and it's a visual thing. So it's either on the charger or in the boot of the car. So convenience versus aesthetics. In all these cases, though, these home chargers will qualify for the €600 SEAI grant that Shane and Geraldine have mentioned there. They're all suitable for the full EV and for the hybrid. And in all these cases, the dynamic load management is very important. Now, a lot of people won't actually know what dynamic load management is, but bottom line, there isn't enough power in the house, in most houses, to support a car and the house at full tilt. This is managed very easily, though, with these clever chargers, because when the car is plugged in, especially a full EV, because that draws more power, but when the car is actually plugged in, and then another heavy user in the house, i.e. an oven or electric shower, is turned on, immediately a message gets sent to the charger to scale back the car to a lower, safer level, to allow the shower or the oven to take precedence over the car. Now, it makes no difference to the car, because the car is plugged in for multiple hours at a time outside anyway and overnight. So having a variable rate of power of supply to the car really makes no difference. But obviously to a shower or to the oven, it makes a huge difference. So the house will be taking priority in a dynamic way over the car at all times. Some of the chargers also are app enabled. So you have got the visibility and the functionality of turning on and off the charger and seeing what's going on with the charger from your phone. Now, there's an element of crossover, really, I suppose, but between the app of the charger and the app of the car, because most cars equally have the same app and can control the charger from there too. Here's just some photographs there of all the different, some of the different chargers there that we have installed around the country, all styles. But here you can see the fixed cables and the untethered versions as well. So the tethered and the untethered across the various different brands. Colorway is important as well. Some people like black, some people like white, and they blend in different ways. So it depends on one's own personal choice there. On the commercial front then, which would be the destination chargers, here you've got a choice of normally speaking, it's 3-phase supply on commercial, whereas on domestic, it's single-phase supply. So on the commercial side, with the 3-phase supply, potentially the chargers can deliver up to 22 kilowatts per socket. Now, the car may not want 22 kilowatts, so it's up to each individual car to decide how much power it wants, even if the supply is available. So in the case of the Renault Zoe, which has been mentioned a few times there tonight, the Renault Zoe will actually pull a whopping 22 kilowatts. So it does charge very fast on commercial destination chargers. The additional extras, of course, with the commercial chargers is that there are billing options, so that workplace and shopping centers and that can actually bill the customer, so the customer pays for the actual usage of the charging session directly. Here are just some photographs now of some completed commercial installations, whether they be pedestal or wall mounted, and there's a full end-to-end service available there. And then the last type of charging would be the public or the rapid type charging. This is DC power. So the interesting thing about DC charging is that effectively this is battery to battery. So that the speed of charging and the rate of the battery filling is much faster. And they're typically on motorways, though. It's called their journey chargers, and they're typically on motorways and the arteries of the country. They're expensive to install, but they give you the confidence and they allow you to get out there to be able to make these long distance journeys, and they can fill a battery then in maybe even 30-40 minutes. So it's a huge asset to increase the range if one is on a long journey. Here's a map there of the west of Ireland now of various different charge points that are currently in state there. And the kind of purple color ones there would be the DC chargers. So the closest to Ballinrobe would be Ballandine, Headfort and Castlebar. But there's lots of other public chargers around. And remember though, the bulk of the individual charging should all be done at home anyway. It's estimated that it'll all be done at home for convenience and for even price point. Because if one has night rate electricity especially, you can get night rate power for what, 6 or 7 cents a kilowatt, versus a public charger could be 23 cents a kilowatt. So like there's a big difference between the two. And if you can charge your car at home, and this is the whole idea of incentivizing want to charge a car at home, it makes perfect sense for everybody. And from a grid perspective, of course, there's plenty of power available on the grid by night. So this is a perfect match for the grid itself, to have cars charging by night when, you know, there's not a lot else happening on the grid, and the wind turbines are still going round and round in circles at a rate of knots that we have here. Next up would be charging cables, because there are different cables available for the different cars. I talked about single and three-phase earlier from a supply perspective, but actually you also have type 1 and type 2. Now, without getting into too much detail, a lot of the Japanese cars would have been type 1, but type 2 is now the European standard and has been since 2018. So type 2 would be the standard charger that you would see around the place, and it's the bulk of these cables here. You'll also have heard about the portable chargers, or the granny cable, it can be known as well. The granny cable will charge a car at a rate of 2.1 kilowatts, which it will get there, but it's slow and will take a long time to charge the car itself, and would not be as safe as the faster charging dedicated home charging point, which will deliver power and charge a full EV at a rate of up to 7.4 kilowatts on the single phase domestic supply. The other thing about charging cables is typically they come as standard in a car of maybe 5 meters. E-Power are specialists in this business, so we carry a wide range of charging cables. As you can see there, 5, 8, 10, 15, and 20 meter lengths. These are important where you've got a 2-car family and you're trying to stretch a cable around the first car, or there's a flower bed or something in the way. You know, you're not putting strain on the charger or the car port. There's plenty of give in the cable if you have extra long lengths. Here's just some of the team here that we have together. And just to recap from our perspective, is that E-Power, we're a dedicated charging business, and we're here to support customers making that transition to electric vehicles. It's a huge transition for people to make towards electric vehicle. I mean, nobody has to teach anybody how to fill petrol or diesel. You know, people have been doing that for generations. But the new car buyer does not know how to charge a car. And that's where E-Power come in, and other companies like ourselves, to be able to support customers in that transition across to electric vehicles. And we're all, of course, supporting dealerships in that transition to help people make the purchase. There's a nationwide installation service, so it doesn't matter where the car is in the country, we will arrange the installation for it. There's the €600 SEAI grant. We'll help and assist that application. So if anybody has any questions about it, we can certainly help and advise and answer. We do free home surveys, so that's important, because we believe that you know, this conversation needs to take place in the person's home. So we arrange for a home survey. The installer will call out and they'll talk and agree with the customer where they would like the charger to be located, and inspect the fuse board and agree the cable run. So there would be no surprises then when the actual price is put together. And that price is agreed up front with the actual customer, so they know exactly what they're getting, having discussed it with the installer on site. We talked about the wide range of EV chargers and cables in stock. The knowledge would be obviously in our type of business and others, because we really want to make this transition across to electric vehicles as seamless as possible. because it's hard for people to get their heads around it. We know that, and dealerships know it, and everybody knows it. But once you've made that transition, it's a dream to drive. And just in terms of further supports, that we have a partnership with SSE Electricity. So there's up to €300 energy credit available for customers that make the switch. And we have an after-hours support as well. So customers should never feel that they're on their own. They're part of a much bigger family. And Caroline or Geraldine, I can't remember who said it, but I did hear you say that all people who drive electric love to talk to other people who ask questions. We're all on this journey, and we all love doing what we do. So there's just a little summary about how we can support people in this transition across. Thanks very much, Caroline.
Thank you, Hugh. And again, if you unshare yourself there, Hugh, so we can get ourselves, there we go. So again, a fantastic presentation and another very informed presentation from Hugh. Hugh, that was great. And we have a few questions. If you want to pop back to us again, we have a few questions for you. But I loved as Hugh was saying there, never feel that you're on your own. At the end of the day, we're all in this together. We all have to eventually go electric. So it will be a case that we'll be continuously educating ourselves on this. I was just saying, Hugh, a very good point. Never feel you're on your own, because we are all in this together. We will all be going electric at some point. So, and as well as that, yes, anybody that does have an electric vehicle loves being asked about it and loves being asked how it's going and the drive of it and all of that. And it is fun, as I have driven electric a number of times. And that initial foot on the accelerator, it does certainly, you won't be driving Miss Daisy, and that's for sure. Hugh, you can hear me there to take a couple of questions, can you?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm afraid my video is frozen a bit, but I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you perfectly. You're frozen in time, but you're looking, as long as we can hear you. So one of the questions that have come in is, can the home charger cable be secured or covered?
Covered from what, dare I ask?
Well,
are we talking about the weather?
I'm going to assume when it says secured that it's in a secure place from, if it's going to be outside. So it's secured or maybe covered so it can't be removed.
Tampered with.
Tampered with, yes.
Yeah, well, like it's attached. It's physically attached to the charger itself. It wouldn't be a wise thing to be tampering with a cable like that. It's not really an issue at the moment. Okay. For these cables at all. If it's from a weather perspective, they're very much, there's no problem with weather. As Geraldine has said, these are sold up in Norway and all in other parts of the world where weather is a lot more extreme than we have to offer.
Okay. You mentioned there about the grant of €600 towards the price of the charger. So what is the price of the charger? How far does that €600 go?
So chargers range in price. You can get a charger from €500 up to over €1,000. So that's one variable on that side. Then on the other side of the coin, you have the individual installation, and every house is different. So that's another variable. As an average installation, somewhere around the 1,100-1,200 mark. And then there is the SEAI €600 grant that comes back off that. So a net cost of about 600. But I do say there are two variables, and the customer may decide to go for the top end charger, and they may have a big house and a very difficult install. So, every individual, every case is slightly different.
Okay.
That's why it's important to do the house surveys.
How do you decide whether to go for the top end or the lower end? What's the decision-making process on that?
Functionality would have a big part to it. Whether you need an app-enabled charger, whether you want an LCD display, whether you want it to be integrated with PV panels, whether you like the look of a certain charger, whether you want it tethered or untethered. So, you know, and brand would be another one. So it's a bit like buying a car, you know, there are different levels, even though the basic charging thing is practically the same.
Okay. Like a mobile phone, as we kind of go back to when it comes to charging, if you're buying a Renault or if you're buying a Peugeot, is it the same charger that you would use on both, or do you have to get different chargers when you're buying the different cars?
No, it'd be the exact same charger.
Okay.
Because now it's the Type 2 charger. So it's you know, it'll suit every car. So the charger itself would be Type 2, but if it was a tethered version, it'll be a Type 2 plug on the end. And if it was a car that happened to be a Japanese one, you know, that they would carry either an adapter or a Type 2 to Type 1 cable.
Okay. Another question in here. On a previous EV webinar, I hear there is an association that monitors the standards for electricians that fit these chargers. Is there something you are involved in, as there seems to be many people fitting units that aren't qualified?
Yeah, that's only coming together, that association, but yes is the answer.
Okay.
Now, as regards not qualified, remember now that the home chargers are grant aided, but they're only grant aided if the installer is fully qualified and Safe Electric registered. And everything has to be signed off and above board and certificates produced. So these cannot be installed with a grant aided by unqualified individuals.
Okay, and is there a list somewhere of qualified electricians to install
there
chargers?
Would be on Safe Electric website, yes.
Okay, we'll actually share that. That's probably a good point. Another one here, if you have an old charger installed at home and need to replace it, what cost would there be as it is pre-wired?
Okay, so it depends on how old, because the older cars used to charge typically at a rate of 3.7 kilowatts. This is in a domestic situation now. The more modern car now would be looking for 7.4 at twice the speed. And what I'm getting to here is that the cables may need to be replaced as well as the charger. So, you know, a survey would need to be done to decide, is it just the box that needs to be replaced, or is it the complete set of cables and RCBO back at the board? Because of the power, you know, it's twice the power is required now.
Okay, so just I got handed a note here. It's 2011 is the age of the charger.
Okay, well, definitely that'll be 3.7. So we're talking about a complete refit, really, including the cables, because they just wouldn't be big enough to carry the level of power.
And would you be entitled into the grant again? Would you be entitled to getting the...
As far as I'm aware, the answer is not. If it was part of the original, the SB originally, I think, got people started with free chargers. There was an early rollout, I think, of about 2,000 chargers that were rolled out free of charge. Now, if the individual qualified for that back then, unfortunately, no, they won't get a grant now. At least that's the current state of play.
Okay.
Now, having said that, they were the early adopters and they have brought the industry in Ireland to where it is. So, I mean, they could be a little bit hard done by there, because we wouldn't be having this conversation if it wasn't for a lot of the earlier adopters.
Okay. And I've one question, final question here, Hugh. If you are away for the weekend and you only have the 3-pin or granny cable to charge, how long would it take to charge a 58 kilowatt battery for, say, 160 kilometers of range?
Okay, so a 58 kilowatt hour battery, that's going to take 26, 27 hours to charge in full. 58 kilowatt hour battery is, what's that, about 350 odd kilometers. So I'd say about 13 hours. So half of the battery it'll take. So I would be thinking about 12, 13 hours.
And I suppose like the price decreasing over the years going forward, is it something that the battery or the how long it takes to charge the battery will come down over the next number of years as well? Because that's always a concern, especially on taking long journeys, that you're going from one end of the country to the other, and it's going to take the car time to charge. Will the charge time be reduced over the next number of years?
It can be. Now you're talking about journey chargers there and the DC chargers. So different cars charge at different rates. The car I happen to drive at charges on AC supply, that would be the home supply now, at a rate of 7.4. But on the DC supply, I can get 77 kilowatts an hour out of it. So it'll charge much, much faster. Every car is different on that, and it's the actual individual charger, depending where you are on the road, you can get 50, you can get 100, you can get 120, 150 kilowatt chargers, but the car itself may not be able to take it. The car at the end of the day is the boss of the relationship and will only take the maximum it wants, subject to the available supply. Does that help answer that question?
Yes, it does. And finally, at the moment, when you drive up to a charge point, there's nearly always one or two chargers. Is that going to change again? Like drive into a petrol station or diesel station now, and they might have 8 points. Will that be a case that in years to come we'll be driving in and it'll be just charge points as opposed to diesel and petrol points?
Yeah, that's already happening in the rest of the world. It hasn't happened here yet. There's huge investment going on the motorway service stations, but there aren't any solo charging stations at the moment, should I say, in Ireland. There are in the UK and Norway and places like that where you'd roll in and there'd be 30, 40 chargers on a site and not a petrol pump in view, but just purely public chargers. But remember, 90% or 95% of the charging will all be done locally. So it's only 5% that will be actually traveling on a long distance. Okay. And I mean long distance as well, because you were talking about the Zoe with a 58 kilowatt hour battery getting 350 odd kilometers. That's a lot of driving in the day. There's not too many people that will be driving more than 350 kilometers in the day. Yeah. Because remember, they can charge it again that night. So you're talking a very, very small number of people here.
Okay, well, Hugh, thank you very much. And again, an awful lot of information in there. So will be shared on the JJ Burke Car Sales website and across our social media channels tomorrow. So Hugh, thank you very much. I think you might stay on with us till the end of the show, as still questions are coming.
Happy to do so.
I am conscious of time. I wanted to make sure we try to get it all done. Thank you very much, Hugh. Much appreciated.
Thanks.
As I said, I'm conscious of time. I want to get this all completed in the next 15 minutes or so, because it has been an overwhelming amount of information. But I want to finish off the evening with our own in-house experts. And in JJ Burke Car Sales, we do have 3. They are the dealer for 3 brands, and 2 of those brands they're going to speak about this evening, and that would be the Renault and Peugeot. So John Robinson, who is our expert on Peugeot and Peugeot EVs, is joining us this evening. And I think John has given us a thumbs up that he is ready to go and he's able to hear us. John, you're more than welcome. Thanks for joining us this evening.
You're welcome, no problem at all.
And we've also met dealer principal Joseph Burke, who we spoke to earlier on in the evening. And Joseph is joining us this evening to talk about the Renault side of the house, as he would be an expert in the Renault EVs and Renault cars that we have here. So we're going to kick off first with John. You can hear myself echoing the background. So John, do you want to take us through some information on the Peugeot and the EVs that are available in the Peugeot range at the moment?
Yep, sure. So currently, for the last year or so, there's been the 208 hatch and the 2008 SUV. They're fully electric. And in the PHEV, we have the 308 hatch coming next year. That's the mid-size hatchback and estate coming. And we currently have the 3008 SUV plug-in hybrid as well. And then in the future, every new model that's released, there will be a plug-in hybrid or electric version of it in the future. So eventually they'll have a full range of alternative fuels.
Okay, and with each of the different models then that we have available, or you have available here at JJ Burke Car Sales, what ranges do they have, John?
Yeah, so the 208 hatch has, in my experience, has a realistic range of between 300 and 350 kilometers on a full charge. And more recently, I've been driving the E2008, and that has the same drivetrain, but it is a little bit heavier. So it is around between, say, in real terms, 270 to 320. On a very good day, it will reach to 350 as well. So they're quite evenly matched.
Okay. You are an EV driver yourself, John.
Yeah.
And what do you think is the difference between driving an EV and your petrol or diesel car?
Well, I used to be a petrol head, and now you could call me a plug head. I absolutely love them. They're fun to drive. They're really fun to drive because without getting too technical, the center of gravity is lower because the batteries are in the floor, so they take corners better. You have a instant torque when you accelerate, and linear power delivery. So to drive, they're really fun. And also when you're just relaxing, you've got the silence of the electric motor. And even I notice small things like if you're on the phone on the Bluetooth, there's less noise. So it's much easier to concentrate on, if you're talking on the phone, something like that. So at the end of the journey, you tend to be more relaxed and less stressed. So it's a win-win really in that regard, I think.
Okay. And with the EVs, John, with Peugeot EVs, what are you looking at when it comes to service?
Well, they need to be serviced the same amount of times as a traditionally engined car, but they do cost up to €50 less per service. And the reason is because there's less moving parts in the drivetrain, there's less fluids, they tend to be an enclosed unit. So it's more about generally electric engineering rather than mechanical engineering. So there's less to go wrong, especially in the longer life of the car. But in servicing, there's less to do because they're generally enclosed drivetrains. So it is a little bit cheaper to service.
Okay, and I suppose like that, I was coming in to get my car in for a service. Yeah. And I'll have to come in after a certain amount of miles. Is there a certain amount of miles that you would come in to get your car serviced, or does it depend on the actual car?
It depends on the actual car, but generally speaking, they're exactly the same intervals as the petrol or diesel. So between 15 and 20,000 kilometers or 1 year. So there's no leap of faith in that regard. It's the same as the car the person would be driving at the moment.
Okay. And I know with Peugeot, there's three ranges there with the Peugeot, the E208, the E2008, and the E3008. So I suppose from a family point of view, which would you recommend for a family of three or family of five with two and three children?
Yeah, well, it's the same recommendation as I would for a traditionally powered car, in qualifying the customer. So it's just, I'd talk about their needs and go from there really. So obviously the more people, the bigger the car is needed. But you try and tailor what the customer needs to the car that's going to suit them best. Okay. Same with costs as well.
And we have a couple of questions coming in there, John. So one is it different driving on icy roads in an EV?
That's a good one. If anything, it's actually probably a little bit better because of the weight distribution of the way the car is constructed. Because in a normal car, you've got a heavy engine at the front, whereas an EV, you generally have the batteries in the floor. So if you were unfortunate enough to lose control on ice or something like that, it's probably easier to get it back with an even more even weight distribution. But in fairness, it would be marginal and it would be an extreme case. So no concern over and above driving on ice in a normal car, I don't think, no.
does Peugeot intend on extending its range of EVs over the next months or years to come?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say that along with all manufacturers, every new model, they'll have an option, either plug-in or electric. And then another generation or two from now, like it was said before, the plug-in hybrids will be a stepping stone. And eventually, I'd say in the next 10 years, they'll have a full range of EVs and plug-in hybrids in every model that they do. And some of them may even be specifically EV-only models in the future. But as at the moment, I'd say the next few models that come out of the next 2 years will have an option either way.
I just saw a question actually come in there as you were talking on the 3008. Is there an EV or a name of an EV coming out? Aim of an EV coming out?
Yeah, I would say now there's nothing confirmed because they've just facelifted the current car, so it's only halfway through its life cycle. But I would say definitely the next generation will be either. Well, currently we have the plug-in hybrid, so they might have both in the next generation, which will be in 3 or 4 years, or they might they will at least enhance the plug-in hybrid model that they have already. But we don't know. It's a little bit far away because the car is still very fresh.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay, perfect. John, thank you very much. Don't go anywhere. We might get
You're
you
welcome.
again later on.
Sure.
Joseph, you're welcome back. Thanks very much.
Hi, Caroline.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
I can. There's a bit of a back, but I think we should be okay. So you're the expert in Renault EVs in dealership in Bannon Road there, Joseph. Can you tell us a little bit about the range that Renault have on offer at the moment?
Yeah, it's very good with Renault what we have at the minute. We've a bit of everything. We have the hybrid, the Clio hybrid. We have plug-in hybrid, which is the PHEV. We have that in our Megane Sports Tourer, and we have it in the Captur. And then we have the famous Zoe, which is one of the pioneering EVs out there. I think it's 2013 was the first Zoe, and as I said earlier on, it's the biggest selling EV in the European market, with something like over 100,000 Zoe sold last year. But what I really like, actually, when I'm talking to a customer about EVs, we do tend to find people are a little bit afraid, maybe, especially in the west of Ireland, of electric vehicles, and it's probably more to do with the unknown of electric vehicles. But it's the PHEV I really like, because it offers the best of kind of both worlds. You know, you can get into an EV. It's a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. You can experience it, and I think Hugh mentioned it there about people's daily commutes. People think that they do a lot more than they actually do. And when I'm talking to someone about a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, you know, it's a 50-kilometer range, which isn't a lot, but would cover a lot of people's needs in their daily commute. So if you just want to kind of, I suppose, dip your toe into the electric vehicle market, the PHEV, in my opinion, is an excellent option, and it's been very successful this year for us. Especially the Captur PHEV has really taken off well. Megane Sports Tourer is an excellent vehicle if you need that extra little bit of room. But, you know, I really like the PHEV. But saying that, with the Renault Zoe, we have an excellent vehicle there that you have, 395 kilometers, realistic, roughly about 350. You know, we're going to have something on, and that's probably summer driving. It goes down a little bit in winter. But again, going back to your daily commute, and Hugh mentioned it there about, you know, you come home, you just get used to it. If you have a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle or a complete electric vehicle, you come home every evening, you have your 7.4 kilowatt charger at your house, and it's just, you know, one of the things you do. You come home, if you need to plug it in, you know, you just go in, plug it in, takes 30 seconds, and off you go. You arrive in the morning then, and you're fully charged again. More so probably the plug-in electric vehicle that you'd be doing that, I would imagine, every day. The electric vehicle wouldn't be as much, depends on your journeys, stuff like that, you know. But we do have something there, you know, to cover everyone, as I said, from the hybrid, the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, and my own favorite, the electric vehicle, the Zoe, you know.
And I think the Zoe is the best-selling EV in Europe at the moment.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It's been the best-selling EV in Europe, I think, for a number of years. As I said, I think it was 100,000 units it did last year in Europe. it's a very good vehicle. It's one of the things that when people see the Zoe, they kind of think it's not big enough for me, but it's surprising. It'll take 5 adults. It'll do 395, as I said, kilometers on a full charge. It's what I really like about the Zoe is the new ZE50. It's how if you buy the quick charging model, how quick you can charge. I think it's from 0 to 80 takes about 30 minutes. Sorry, no, it takes a little bit longer. Sorry, that was a bit over an hour, so it is. But I think you can get up to 145 kilometers in something like 30 minutes. So if you are doing your journey from Mayo to Dublin, you were coming back down, you could stop for a coffee. You get inside 30 minutes, you get 145 kilometers, which is, it's amazing. What the development of these cars. Like I remember the first Zoe I think we had was something like realistic range I had was 100 kilometers, and now they're up to 395 kilometers, maybe 350 realistic range, but it's come on so much.
And do you think, in the next, say, 3 to 5 years, that'll go up considerably? Are we looking at staying around the 400 for a few years? Where do you see that going?
It's like any technology, I suppose it will improve. It's improved drastically in the last few years. Will it improve more? Quite possibly, yes. There is a good possibility it'll improve more. But I think you're starting to see cars, they're all coming in around the same thing now. There is some a little bit more, but they're a bit more expensive of a car. There's some a little bit less, It is something that probably will improve. It's like anything, everything improves, Since I started selling cars, I won't tell you how long ago that is, but cars have always improved, and every few years you see your petrol and your diesel cars, they improve, So there's always an improvement out there, whether it be safety wise. But sorry, get back to what you're on about there. Yeah, there will be an improvement, but when will that happen and how much it will be? It's very hard to know.
I have a question here, Joseph, for you. How long do you think will it be before we have an electric car? And I suppose it follows on from what I just asked, that would go from Ballinroad to Dublin and back without the worry of having to recharge, say 300 miles.
Well, I would say just with the Zoe there, so you're going to miles there, but would say, yeah, from Dublin and back, which is probably, I think Dublin from where we are now, it's about 200 kilometers. So realistically, but the thing about that is, so you get to Dublin, you're going to Dublin for some particular reason. Is that when you get there and you pull into, maybe it's a shopping centre, they're going to have the electric chargers, or you find somewhere that there's an electric charger when you go in and do whatever business you're going to do in Dublin, you'll charge your vehicle. So when you come back out, then you've got more of a charge again. It's just a little bit of a different mindset when you own an electric vehicle, and it's just a little bit more planning. Not much, but just a little bit more. And it's funny, even, I heard you talking to Geraldine, I think, about driving Miss Daisy. And anytime I drive an electric vehicle, I do find I'm driving that little bit easier with the car, because I'm just thinking, and you just do it without even thinking. Sorry, I was about to say thinking. You drive a little bit more conservatively because you're thinking of your battery. So it's a great thing for penalty points and everything. I always notice I always stick at the limit, no matter where I am. Not saying that I don't do that regularly, but
yeah. Don't put yourself in trouble here now.
Yeah. But no. But it can be done. It again, just come back to that question. It's you plan your journey. You do plan your journey.
Thing. Yeah.
And it's electric vehicle is just there's a tiny bit more thought goes into it, but it's anyone, no matter what mileage you're doing, electric vehicle can suit anyone, in my opinion.
Okay. Just another question here, Joseph. For my low mileage requirement, the greenest thing that I can do is continue to use my low miles petrol car. Am I going to be forced out of that by the government's rush to get us into EVs?
No, to answer the question, the government won't. I don't see that. I think what the government are doing they're giving grants towards trying to get people to change to electric, to encourage change to electric. That's with our SAI grant. But my answer to that that's my answer to that question about will the government change someone. But to that particular person, what I would say is if they were here in front of me in the dealership and I was talking to them and we were looking at, we'll say, a petrol vehicle and they're doing low mileage, the first thing I would say, have you considered electric? And you may get someone saying, I'll never buy an electric vehicle. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's an uneducated answer, because and this is what this event is about, to try and educate people why electric vehicles are for anyone out there, really realistically. So if you're doing small mileage, an electric vehicle is absolutely for you. You can actually save money. So buying an electric vehicle, I can just think back to one particular customer there that bought a Zoe off me a year and a half ago. And we looked at monthly costs of his ownership of his vehicle. And I said to him, can we look at monthly costs? He looked at monthly costs of the actual, what he was paying monthly for his vehicle. And I said, can we look at your actual ownership costs of your vehicle? So we went and we put all of that together, and I presented him with what an electric vehicle would be. And he went from, I think it was a Renault Grand Scenic. Now, he didn't need that size of a vehicle, diesel vehicle, to a Renault Zoe. And he's saving money now. That customer has thanked me. He's been in getting his car serviced and said, look, it did exactly that. It saved me money. So I think you can actually save money where people don't think that they can go into an electric vehicle. It can actually cost them less when they look at the overall ownership of the vehicle.
Okay. Thank you very much, Joseph. And like that, yourself and your team here at the dealership in Ballinrobe are always on hand to answer any questions that you have regarding electric vehicles, regarding PHEVs, hybrids. So John, yourself and the rest of the team here are always on hand. So I have a couple of questions here. So we might actually bring in Hugh to answer a question that's come in for him. If we want to push Hugh, yeah, I think Hugh. Hi, Hugh, welcome back. You there, Hugh?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah,
so
great.
So Hugh, one of the questions that have come in here, and we'll do a quick Q&A because as I said, I am conscious of time and everybody has been fantastic given their time this evening. So we'll just do a quick Q&A. This, as I said, will be up on our website tomorrow. And any questions that are not answered this evening, we will get back to everybody. So Hugh, what is the impact of charging a car domestically where the house is built to modern building standards using geothermal heating to heat the house, which is a 16 kilowatt electric supply, or is there any issue?
So this is where the dynamic load management kicks into place. Because the heating and it's part of the main fabric of the house. The car will only work within the available capacity if dynamic load management is incorporated into the charger. And it is in all the modern chargers. So, you know, if the heating kicks in, there will be less power available to go out to the car, just like your shower or your oven. But obviously the geothermal is a heavier draw again.
Okay. Thank you, Hugh. I have a question here for Geraldine. Geraldine, are PHEVs a good or bad compromise? I only see the inefficiency of either using the electric motor to cart around the petrol engine or using the engine to cart around the motor and the batteries. Am I looking at it wrong, or do PHEVs have their place?
Yeah, no, PHEVs do have their place. As I said, what really determines whether or not they suit you is the sort of driving that you do. I mean, if they do 50 to 60 kilometers on pure electric mode, the ideal scenario is that you can avail of that on a daily basis, and then you're barely dipping into your petrol engine. I mean, I know people who drive them and they might go to a filling station once a month. They are literally doing their entire commute, you know, on the electric mode. That's the ideal situation. As I said, though, you have to be prepared to charge them every night. You have to have a commute that's designed around availing completely of that electric range. I mean, I can understand why people think you have to charge it and you have to fill it. Like, what is the point? But no, it's a matter of just approaching them from a different angle and just thinking to yourself, it's essentially an electric vehicle where you have the reassurance of a petrol engine if you decide to go down the country. And that's really the way to look at it. You want to be using that electric range on a daily basis.
Okay. Thank you, Geraldine. And finally, I'm going to the last question. Shane, if the cost of batteries go down, will the SEAI grants disappear?
That's a good question. I must say that, well, as Geraldine mentioned earlier, we would be hoping that price parity would be coming towards 2024. It would be hitting us where you see the petrol diesel at the same as the electricals. The basis behind a grant in the first place is to state the market, and to be removed, the market is self-sustaining. So the grant is in place there to encourage the uptake and the mass uptake at that of electric vehicles in Ireland as we all move towards this pathway to 2030 and the ambitious targets that we have to hit. So once the kind of mass uptake of electric vehicles has happened in Ireland, I would envisage that the grant would be removed, because in an actual fact, that's essentially what a grant is there to do. It's to stimulate that mass uptake, that mass market uptake of electric vehicles, and then it will be removed. So I would say further down the line, when we're seeing that mass market move towards EVs, you would see the grant being removed, but not for the forthcoming.
Okay, thank you. So I want to finish off the evening by thanking everybody for coming along with us this evening. We are overwhelmed with the turnout we had. We put on this information evening saying, look, guys, if we get a few people along to listen to us and get all the information from our amazing experts, and we're overwhelmed by the attendance this evening. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for our panelists. But I'm going to give the last word over to Dealer Principal Joseph Burke to say the final word. Joseph.
Thanks, Caroline. No, I'm just going to keep it short as well. It's just to thank everyone. I want to thank all our staff here at JJ Burke Car Sales, especially Shona, whose idea this came at a marketing meeting one day, and it's gone on very well. Thank you, Shona. To Keith and Michael, who are here in the background, running around, and Karen, I see waving over there. John for his expertise with Peugeot. Thanks, John. I especially want to thank our speakers who were excellent. Geraldine, Hugh, and Shane from the SAI. Very, very good. And like really, we wanted to make this evening an information evening, not an evening about us trying to sell what we have. It's information about electric vehicles, and we really think, something like this will help people, understand a little bit more about electric vehicles. So look, thanks guys, and really want to actually thank as well Peugeot and Renault, who always support us, and look, we've great products there in the electric range, and really want to thank them. And thanks everyone that came along and participated, and there's been some very, very good questions, and I think it shows that the people that are really interested in this and have good knowledge in that. And actually, I've just been reminded I need to thank my own customer and neighbour, Seamus Coyne, for doing the testimonial, who's a very good advocate of the Renault Zoe EV. Thanks an awful lot. And look, guys, thanks. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.